Good morning, everyone. My name is Miriam Hewitt. I'm Assistant Director at the Center for Public Service. Welcome to this session of the CPS Speaker Series. Today's talk is titled Power in Partnership. And it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker and facilitator, Ms. Kathryn Hall-Trujillo. For over 40 years as a public health administrator, community health educator, and advocate in the public and private sectors, Ms. Kathryn has been addressing the racial and gender divide in women's access to healthcare. Her work has culminated in Birthing Project USA, the Underground Railroad for New Life, which is a global maternal and child health organization working in 13 countries. Her experience in understanding, translating, and bridging policy, administration, services delivery, and client cultures has earned her national and international recognition, including presentation of the Lifetime Achievement Living Legacy Award and appointment as an official ambassador by the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, which is a United Nations affiliate. Ms. Hall-Trujillo has also received the UCLA School of Public Health Lifetime Achievement Award and is an Ashoka Global Social Entrepreneur Fellow. She had a 5-year collaboration here at Tulane as Ashoka Fellow in Residence from 2009 to 2015 and received the 2010 Tulane Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award. She's an independent scholar of the Cuba Public Health System, serves on the Medical Advisory Board of IFCO, is an adjunct faculty for Charles Drew University of Medicine, and visiting professor for the Cuba National School of Public Health, where she facilitates courses for US students and professionals. Ms. Kathryn is a consultant and mentor to many community leaders, students, and young professionals, to whom she is affectionately known as Mama Kat. And before passing on to her, we would like you to answer 3 questions that I'm gonna pop in the chat. The first is, where are you coming from in terms of your discipline and work and community engagement? The second is to rank your experience with community engagement on a 1 to 10 scale, and share some lessons learned on what to do and not to do when it comes to community engaged work. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to do that.
So you see this big smile on my face because for me, this is coming full circle. And what we're going to talk about today is what I learned from my time at Tulane. Before I became an Ashoka Fellow, I would never have considered myself a member of the academic community. The leading sentence in terms of the course description or the session description today says academic and community partnership is one of the most powerful methods of education, transfer of knowledge and sources to healing when it is collaborative, authentic, equitable, and courageous. And I would say that the fact that I'm sitting here today and talking to you is a real example of how that can happen and the results of when that happens right. I was part of the first Economic Opportunities Program in the United States back in 1968, I believe. And that is when every university that was receiving federal funding had to have a certain number of people of color in order to continue receiving funding. And I literally moved out of living in the bus station in Oakland with 2 children onto the campus of UCLA. And that was the first time I believe that UCLA had to come into a real partnership with the community of people that were now students of UCLA. So as an example, I had 2 children and I couldn't live in the dormitory because I had 2 children. I could not live in married student housing because I didn't have a husband. And the university felt that that would corrupt the morals of the married students. So basically, I had to sue the university in order to be able to live on campus. But that brought to the university's attention what it really means to say, we're going to be in collaboration, we're going to be in partnership with this really beautiful goal and objective of expanding education to everyone. The second thing that UCLA had to do is UCLA had to figure out what they were going to do with women like me who were moving on campus who had children, and UCLA did not have a childcare. So I do believe that my son was probably one of the first members of UCLA's first childcare facility. And I'm saying that to say that when we're looking at what we're doing, are we talking short term or long term? And the fact that this transaction, what started off as a transactional checklist for every university to do certain things in order to maintain their federal funding, turned out to be something that was not only transactional, that was transformative in the sense of what the bigger goal may have been of helping me to become not only the person that's receiving all the wonderful things that a university can do, but to actually end up being a part of helping to develop and implement and to sustain all of the wonderful things that a university can do. And so in the career I had prior to Ashoka Fellowship, I saw my role as being on the ground, and the Birthing Project was really the first grassroots community-based African-American maternal and child health project in the country. And basically the idea was the opposite paradigm of what we're looking at today. It was basically, and continues to be in 13 countries, providing consultative services to women who are developing nonprofit organizations to learn how to collaborate and partner with the institution and resources that they need in order to continue their work, as well as to really partner with universities to help them understand how to document their work, how to evaluate their work, and to do those skills that they may not know how to do. And so I spend the majority of my time working on the other side, doing the same presentation, unless there are people here from nonprofit organizations. And if there are any, would you raise your hand? So one of the things that we really need to think about is working toward making these kind of sessions more joint from the beginning so that everyone is getting the same information, raising, and it's funny, raising the same questions, because people feel the same way on both sides, but sometimes it's harder to discuss those with people that you don't know. The two-lane, it wasn't an experiment, but I believe I came in when two-lane was becoming an Ashoka University. And the purpose of an Ashoka University was to rethink education. And some parts of it, of rethinking it, include thinking about what is education? Who owns education? For example, just because you bought it, is it yours? You know, are only people that have a certain level of initials behind their name considered educators? And this was the first time, I believe, when Tulane was actually making community service a graduation requirement. And I don't know how many of you are New Orleans natives? Raise your hand. Well, New Orleans was a great way to do this experiment of how do you turn a bunch of Tulane students loose on the community. And I see you understand exactly what I mean, because the community was going, nah, I don't think so. But, and we didn't have a model or a road to follow. So the idea was, how could we actually do this? And also this was right after Katrina. And so young people from all over the country wanted to come to New Orleans and help. And so what we realized is that we wanted to do something that we really did not know how to do, but we genuinely wanted to do it. Well, I would assume most people wanted to do it because they cared. Some people wanted to do it because that was what was standing between them and their degree. And the thing that was most evident, though, was because we didn't have a roadmap, who should actually be involved in planning this, who should participate in it, and how would we evaluate it? So one of the things that I decided to do as an Ashoka Fellow was demonstrate the role of a community professor. And that's what I still consider myself, and that's what I try to cultivate globally now, is to help people be a part of an academic team, but still be rooted in their community. I work in Cuba primarily as kind of the mama of the US students who are part of the US Cuba Medical School program, where Cuba gave us 500 scholarships for students from the US to go and get an absolutely free medical education so that they could work with nonprofit organizations because they didn't have huge loans to pay back. And we are the only country out of 103 countries that participate in Cuba in the medical school program scholarship, that where our students do not go back to the communities that they came from. Because the thing that really inspires people to get an education, to help solve problems they see in their communities, in our country, usually you can't go back to the community that you came from because, first of all, there are no employment opportunities. And that's very sobering. So you heard on my bio that I'm now at Charles Drew School of Medicine in Compton, Watts, Los Angeles. We are the only social justice public health school in the country. But when I went to UCLA, that school did not exist. And our generation built that school on the ruins of the rebellions that happened there during the 70s. But it was never fully sourced enough to really hire people to come back and make a living doing work in their own community. So the majority of people who are from that area, who are my colleagues, had to go and find work where they could because that work did not exist in their community. And so most of the communities probably that you still work in New Orleans, we become like, we have great brain drains. Like people are from there, people get educated, but people cannot go back home and work. And so the idea of actually thinking about how do you have colleagues when you are at the university and you are doing this great work, how do you literally have a colleague in the community who is getting paid to do the same work that you're doing from the perspective that is so critical and necessary? And I wonder, have any of you noticed that before? That you're on work time when you meet with a community person and they're on volunteer time, for example. Kendra, I see the wheels turning in your head. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I see that. I find that a lot, and it makes it, I think it makes it difficult to maintain connection sometimes just because of feeling you're taking up that person's time or not to take up too much time.
Okay, so that is like a real thing. And now it's a national issue because now it's a national issue because at the federal level, we're trying to figure out how to pay doulas as Medicaid providers. And they're having like 10,000 meetings every day. I'm dressed like this because after we leave, I'm going to go to a meeting, trying to look professional. But do you know that if you are eking out a living as a community doula with women that really can't afford to pay you, you really don't have time to go to those meetings, really and truly. The other thing around even going to a meeting or trying to collaborate with someone that is not in your own community is language. When I came to Tulane, I was as pissed off as everybody else that we kept talking about innovation. And if you didn't know the word innovation and couldn't spell it, you couldn't even be in the conversation. But this country has been changing ever since it first was founded. And the idea that you could come up with a word that was a carrier of a whole new culture, that then you expected, so when you asked for change agents and innovators, people did not even know what you were talking about in order to say, I want to be on that team. So one of the most important barriers to actually working with someone is language, and feeling that the language that you're speaking is the predominant language. Even at the medical school in Cuba, sometimes we have to go through 7 language transitions to have a conversation, because just because you speak English doesn't mean that you speak the same English that people speak in New Orleans, or that people speak in Boston, or that people speak in the UK, or that people speak in Nigeria, or the same thing for Spanish. And so the idea that language is the carrier of the culture also becomes a big barrier in terms of who's going to show up and who wants to play with you. So we talked about time, we talked about language, but we also didn't, the idea that language is the carrier of the culture is that culture has such a big impact on being on the team. You know, you have to get a uniform. And just like now, women who are playing on professional teams don't necessarily want their bottoms showing, you know, the way that it's like, well, if you're going to be a cheerleader, then you have to show a certain amount of this and a certain amount of that. And times are changing. And, you know, people are saying that's not the uniform I want to wear. So it's ironic that just in the 3 years, I can now show up with my hair like this, and I'm not supposed to be discriminated against because there's something called the Crown Act. But before that, just identifying who would be on the team and who could play and who you thought was intelligent enough to be on the team. And by the way, this works both ways. And that's why I say that it's not just what the university's perspective is, but it's very, very hard for a community organization to open up their doors and let strangers in, because we also have a lot of prejudices, a lot of defense mechanisms. We're looking at the world from the same historical perspective that the university is looking at the world. You know, so one of the things we did in New Orleans at Tulane, rather than having our community people come on campus and meet with the people who are working with them collaboratively, or having the people who were working collaboratively with organizations go to the organization, we literally had an office that was in the middle that was the meeting ground. So that if you weren't on anyone else's space, you know, you weren't in their neighborhood, and no one had the upper hand in terms of power because this was mine and you were coming to visit me. So that was the third thing, is literally where you meet, where you have meetings. We talked about little things like how you dress, how you speak, how you wear your hair. What have I missed? I like your name, Lexus. What have I missed?
I don't believe you've missed anything. We're listening. We're ready.
So what did you find the most interesting so far?
that shared language piece. I'm coming from my current role is, and I'm not from New Orleans proper. I'm from Kenner. That's where the airport is, which is why I laugh because I have my own experiences. But now my current role is in the art museum, and there is a language. We're working on a show for the spring semester that centers the impacts of incarceration on young people. There is a language to that system. There's a language to what's happening in the art world and visual arts world. There's a language for community organizing, and it's not easy for things to get lost because when there is no shared vocabulary or shared language or taking the time to build that between each other.
Yes, that is really, I can't stress that enough. And if I were going to refer you to anyone, I would refer you to Dr. Edwin Nichols. I love him. He's older than God. And he, he, uh, he just explains this in such a way, it opened a door for me in terms of the migration from Africa and the change, how language changed as people migrated based on their physical environment, and how language, if you look at it in a non-judgment way, the things we say about people or the words that they say or their behavior, but the behavior is based on survival skills in order to survive in an environment. And then the language adheres to that. And so I think that if I were going to suggest anything that people need, if there was a course, which I think there ought to be, well, because now some kind of an academic, I never would have said that about myself a few years ago. Now that I'm some kind of an academic and we're talking about developing curriculum, I think we jumped into collaboration and partnership way too soon. And that we need to give ourselves time to actually think about what we're doing, figure out who we want to do it with, and what kind of preparation we need for that. So I think that starting at the process for doing this, that the process includes some training and development around even what the process will be. And part of it is looking at those kind of things. But I don't know if it's more important or just as important, is developing a relationship with the people that you want to work with before you decide the work that you want to do with them. So before I went to Cuba, I was in Dominican Republic. And I was in Dominican Republic with another organization I suggested you look up, and it's called Opportunities Collaborative. And Opportunities Collaborative is an organization that's working on the Sustainable Development Goals. And quite honestly, they're an unconference and an unorganization. And what they do is they bring people together, kind of like on the Ashoka. In fact, that's how I got there as an Ashoka Fellow. The Ashoka Fellows, a team of us were invited to attend Opportunities Collaborative. And they bring people together that kind of have ideas about what could happen with people who have access to resources, or the people with resources, and resources doesn't always mean money, to get to know each other. And one of the rules is you can't beg for money. You can't, just try to market yourself. The idea is to really get to know other people, and in the getting to know the other people, deciding, if that's somebody you would like to work with. And I can't believe how they actually can match up people, because at the core of who I am, I'm a midwife. And the first day that I was there, somehow or another, I ended up having a drink at the pool, because all you do is play while you're there and talk to people, who was a pilot. And somehow or another, we got on the conversation of things that we wouldn't do. And I was on the water. The place where we were was on the water. And I never swim in water that's over 5 feet because I'm 5 feet tall. That's my idea of swimming. So he, as a pilot, was saying to me, well, what I really like to do is I like to sail. Have you been sailing? I was like, didn't I just tell you I don't swim? 1, 2, I'm not going in the ocean. And then I was thinking, I really ain't going with this big old white man in the ocean. I could die. And how could I explain that to my family, why I was on the ocean with a white man trying to sail? And somehow or another, I decided I would take him up on it because it was a thing about getting over fear. And that thing that stops you from actually going further with another person. Like, I really was kind of fascinated that he was my age, that he flew a big plane every day, like Delta or something like that. And what that would kind of be like under the kind of stress you would have. And why was he there? Why was he interested in meeting the sustainable development goals that did not seem to have anything to do with the social service provider? So as we were getting on the plane and on the sail thing, and I was like saying my last goodbyes to the whole world, I asked him, why do you connect sailing to flying a plane? And he said, well, when I'm flying a plane, I'm riding the airwaves, the air currents. And when I'm sailing, I'm riding the water currents. And I immediately connected with him because when I'm helping a woman breathe her baby down, she's riding the currents of labor. And she's trying to get on top of that. She's trying to sense when they're coming. She's trying to figure out if there's a pattern and whatever. And I will tell you, that became the language, the common language that we developed around an experience that was so far out there. And it never would have happened between the two of us if somehow or another we had not been kind of, I won't say coerced, but put in a situation where we could take a budding relationship a little bit further. And so by the time that sailboat got back to land, I was so comfortable, I was asleep because I knew about riding waves. And that has led to a really nice relationship between the two of us because it was so funny that you could take two things that were so separate and find some common ground. So the Work and Opportunities Collaborative is really around helping people find that common ground that you didn't think was there, and then work together towards meeting sustainable development goals. So there were 400 of us in Dominican Republic from 40 countries. It was a very different experience. But the idea, and this is my 5th year going, but the idea of how do we apply a concept like that, for example, to a university, where instead of doing, the first thing we're doing is doing a project. What if we really had someone that we got to know a little bit differently than the superficial transactional way that we make relationship with future partners? Clement, what do you think about that?
I agree with you that we do have to find a common ground or meet somewhere in the middle, because culture is very important. And if we don't understand where we overlay or overlap, it's going to be frustrating.
So then the question becomes, with the things that we're really talking about that we actually know to be true, is it possible to do that in a university setting?
You would assume so, but it is difficult because I personally can attest to coming from an HBCU and coming to Tulane has been a total cultural shock for me. But I have noticed that if you
right now we're looking at
your
the
ideas and your
responses
topics and your thoughts,
and then what we will do is
there's
we'll
some people that
actually
are
remove
receptive, and
everything,
then that
not just
can be
receive
the
comments that they need. Because
the
Even if they fill
initiator
out the graph,
or
like
the factor that can
their
create.
data.
So you just have to be receptive, but also be, I guess, bold in your attempts. But you just have to have an open heart, open mind, and just see what happens.
So, okay. So actually, then if you were going to do it, you'd be looking at what kind of support do people need to actually go into the unknown and make friends with somebody that they don't know. What I realized from the students that came to Tulane to help in New Orleans, they were well-meaning, good students, but they were terrified of their colleagues, the people who were their same age who lived in New Orleans. That was, I didn't expect, I never even thought about that before. They felt that the people who were their age, who lived in New Orleans, did not like them, number one. Number two and number three, did not like them and did not want them there, did not trust them, did not all of that. And so that was something that the worst experience that happened is when people go to help and they're not greeted with open arms, then they become raving people on the other side that don't like the people that weren't nice to them, feel that they're not accepted, not wanted, and this is not a place they should be putting their energies. And that's a real valid human reaction to when you put something out there and people don't accept it, don't want it. But it's also one of the elephants in the living room that we don't talk about. But after I was able to do a little, follow up, I know people a long time, I see how they ended up on the other side of giving up on that and feeling jaded. So what I actually asked them to do is everyone, and I know Julia's probably sick of me and these little stones, everyone had a stone. And the idea was by the end of the semester, your stone had to have a name of a person that you have met. Because oftentimes too, when we talk about the community and a nonprofit organization and target population, it doesn't have a face on it. And so to actually put a face on it, like I met one person that this stone is always going to remind me of that one person, humanizes and gets us more into the transformative part than the transactive part of saying, I went down there and I helped build a school. So what would be, so to me, I'm saying that's a really hard thing. And I know it's a hard thing, but how do we keep it from being a no-go? Carter, when's the last time you just popped into a place and said, I'm here, love me? Or how hard was it for you, or how much courage did it take for you to pop into a place and be there, whether people, regardless of how welcome you felt or whatever?
I don't remember the last time I did that where the group wasn't already one that I thought would be welcoming. So yeah.
Okay. So what would it take for you to go into a group where you actually didn't know, with the intention of maybe coming out with someone that you'd like to know better?
I think I'd have to have that intention. And maybe the intention would have to be something that was separate from any sort of collective identity of the group. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It does, because it hinges on the first part of the assignment that we're talking about giving ourselves, is like, why are we doing this and who benefits from it? So why would you put yourself through letting someone from the university into your personal space? What's the benefit of doing that? What's the incentive to do it? And then what is the benefit and the incentive for, if you're in the university, to actually leave your comfort zone and go in with an intention that was more than just getting your project done? Oh my God, there's Stephanie Barksdale. But that is the question. Is it worth it? Or is it worth it? Oh my God. Or is it worth it? Or is it worth it to stay in the safe place?
Can I say I love you naming connection as the goal to start something versus solving a problem. I think it's, in my long trajectory of growth, I love that you're still teaching me something every day. That connection, right? I have students that say, why are you in social change work? And they're like, because I want to help people. And what does that mean? Like, I want to connect. It's such a heartful statement. And thank you for reminding us of that.
So you've been around long enough to know, do you think this is something the university would actually consider, of adding adding resources to that pre-part?
Oh, that's my battle every day. So, I currently hold a role as an adjunct in an undergraduate minor. So I try to engage that as my students, like that the goal is not the outcome of some project, but of a personal growth and learning. We are developing new centers at the university, and as I also wear a philanthropy hat. And so sometimes as a funder, I'm encouraging that. So Tulane's strategy for tomorrow, I think, is a good place where at the university level, if departments and schools put resources around a strategy for tomorrow. But what you're making me realize is, could we name the outcome of a relationship as the goal of the strategy for tomorrow? So hopefully people will hear the strategy for tomorrow is our equity plans, like that. That's like that's my offer of this conversation.
That is a part of it, of redefining, or not, it's not redefining, but expanding the definition of education. And if we keep using the same terms, then we're going to keep defining the same outcomes, and it doesn't really give us the capacity to have better outcomes. Things that we can't quantify, we know how important. For example, intuition. We know how important intuition is, but it's really hard to quantify it. And so we tend not to value it in the same way that things that we can count. But maybe now that we know about emotional intelligence, maybe there's a whole new door opening to what we know that relationships are the most important variable in terms of most things. But how much courage does it take to actually do research on relationship for real? Especially because the things that are usually most important to us are the hardest to communicate. because we don't have collective words for it, for example, or we may not have words, but we know that body language is much more communicative than words. So I'm talking to the university. This is the seat of learning and moving things forward. Y'all own knowledge. What would it take to, if you believe it, that this is that important part of actually getting to the point of doing academic and community partnership? Is it worth thinking about and investing in? Is it Deanna or Diana? Deanna Soto Olsen.
Yes. Hi. What is it worth it? I think it's worth it. I think it's you know, worth being brave, and also I was thinking about the words transparency and accountability. So I think honesty is very important. And so I'm an immigrant in this country, and this didn't happen a long time ago. This happened 3 years ago. And it takes a lot of courage to come and live in a different place, and the doors open to you, and if the doors are open, then there's so many doors that are closed, and sometimes you have to go through that door, and it's the best thing that can happen in your life. And I think it takes a lot of courage and adaptability and flexibility, but I think not taking advantage of that alone, one has to be very transparent and very honest and stay accountable. If there were somebody who opened the door, you kind of have to open the door for others too, and be as honest as possible. Not an easy task.
Which one of you works with the medical students?
I do.
Well, hello, Miss Jessica.
Hello. Sorry, I'm in my car right now. I can't turn on my camera.
So, how do you teach this to your medical students?
So I'm still kind of figuring out the best way to do that. My role as a course director for the medical students is teaching first and second year medical students about kind of the soft aspects of being a physician before they get to their clinical rotations. And as part of that, they have to do service learning, where they go out and interact with the community, perform services for the community, and learn through the process of doing that. But I don't feel like I have a great way yet to prepare them to interact in an appropriate way with community members. Some people do that naturally, but I think it would be great to have a more structured way of preparing all students to do it in a culturally sensitive, appropriate manner.
I would like to follow up with you. If I remember correctly, Tulane was one of the medical schools that was kind of attached to the Cuban medical school. And at some point you were actually doing more with social work in medicine. Did you follow through with that?
I don't know of any connection between the Cuban medical school and Tulane, but that it's possible that I just don't know about it.
You had someone there who had spent a lot of time in Cuba. He's not there anymore, but the thinking. So anyway, our medical students from the US, they have to dummy down when they go for their residency interviews. And the reason why they have to dummy down is because Cuba puts a lot of importance on students learning to trust their instincts as well as anything else. But also when they do their first year of practice, which is their third year, they just do it the third year, they start off working with people that remind them of their grandparents to develop their bedside manner.
That's a great idea.
but you know, it's those kinds of things that kind of help. So it's all over. It's how do we teach our students to develop, you know, those kind of personal relationships with people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more pronounced in medicine than it is with other professions, but that's not necessarily true, because even if you spend your whole day in the classroom talking to students, the students are your, in a sense, your patients, your clients, your whatever, and what you are teaching them, there's more that you're teaching them that's not in words that really is in words.
Absolutely.
And then the other part about it is that everybody here that we're looking at each other right now, we have the same challenges of working with each other, you know, being a part of a system that we're probably not in charge of, you know, where it's like the paradigm of being a community of people working with an institution and within an institution and working with each other. So whatever we're modeling for the community, we're also modeling it for being a part of an academic community, I think. So this is our own survival as well as community survival. Does that make sense, Kendra? Why?
I think it's because, like, when you're talking about the connection, it's like gotta be real. And like communities don't just exist out of thin air. There's that common, I don't know, it feels like in terms of, you can't fake community. You can't like read books about that, or it's a learned, involved experience.
We've done one project with the Cubans. It's the Chicago project. You can Google it. But the last thing that Obama did as he was leaving office was he signed an agreement between our public health, Office of Public Health, or whatever it's called, and the Cuban Ministry of Health. And so we've done one project where the Cubans were on the ground in Chicago doing maternal and child health. And one of the lessons learned is that the first thing Cubans do is a community assessment. And we had no idea in the United States how to do a community assessment. We tripped over everything from HIPAA and confidentiality and what a person is, that if you're a service provider, you know, that's your client and nobody else, you're not supposed to talk to anybody else but that particular person. And so we just really understood, not only that, it's kind of what you were saying, Kendra, in a different way. Just because you live in a zip code doesn't make you a community. You know, what is a community in the United States and how many communities do you belong to? And where do they overlap? And what really is the core of even what you're trying to get to when you're talking about doing a community collaborative? Who are you actually talking about, and who does that organization represent, and how much of a community does that organization represent? So if you would look at, like, my core community was Ashe when I was there. But Ashe is so diverse. So when you say I'm talking about, I'm doing something with Ashe, what exactly does that mean? What does that mean, Deidre? I'm like, you don't have a poker face. You can't be my partner.
You are so absolutely correct about that. I cannot say it either. But you said so much that resonated with me, and I'm looking at my colleague, Dr. Francois, on the screen, and Dr. DeBoard, because I am a clinical social worker that came from the community, and I have found it very challenging to collaborate within Tulane's community because it's a different culture. It really is for me. It's a whole learning curve. And so when everything you said has made so much sense to me. So for example, Dr. DeBoard and I have worked together to bring the medical students and the social work students together so that the medical students can learn from the social work students and the social work students can learn from the medical students. And that is such an important piece of the puzzle. And so, but to really help to get folk to really understand how important that is and how it translates once you get into the community, it's Dr. DeBoard understands it, but I don't think, you know, the Tulane community understands what a big deal that is. I think that in terms of clinical community, developing these relationships from the beginning does not get enough support because it is so important that we are in the community and that it is acknowledged that it's an important part and component for Tulane. And just, you know, for Tulane to understand that, yes, it should be acknowledged that professors are out in the community and working and not just doing research, although research is very important, but that the two connect. And Dr. Francois and I actually did a project together that demonstrated that. So everything you said makes infinite sense to me.
You all should be a model because you have all the pieces and you have done some amazing work that hasn't been integrated into a bigger system. I think it was someone in your school of social work that did the research project around how Black babies thrive in NIC units when their moms hold them and touch their heads, rub their, that's a Tulane research project that it's probably one of the best kept secrets, but one of those practices that people who know about it say, well, let's try this.
Yeah, that's Dr. Marva Lewis did that one.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. That's her work. You have amazing people that are there. And it was the idea of how do you integrate into the Tulane community. So that's what I meant about you have your own community. And one of the things that made this work in the beginning and I'm thinking about something when Stephanie picked me up from the airport. She was telling me something about the Queen, and I thought she was talking about Aretha Franklin. But that's just how from the beginning, you know, like that language thing can throw you off. But where Changemaker was housed in the women's building or something, it was like, that was like one place in the beginning where there was a common interest around certain things. You know, it was like there was a community there. And so what I'm saying is like one of the answers may be finding the community within the community that supports the work you want to do on campus already. And usually one of the biggest drawbacks to being a Changemaker campus for Ashoka purposes is that in order to become a Changemaker campus, every department in the university has to agree to be a part of it. And for most universities, that's the thing where you go as far as you can and you can't go any further because the departments don't like to play together. But there are people of like mind in all the departments that if you rally around the thing that you have in common, then you're creating a like-minded community to support you in the work that you want to do. Is that a yes or no, Emily?
So similar, well, I'm not going to compare myself to Deidre, but my background is in the nonprofit, non-academic world. That's what I'll say, in the community and homeless services. And earlier, when you were asking Carter about, what does it take to walk into a community, I was thinking about my draw to folks that are, unsheltered. and how it's taken practice, and it's taken, being okay with not knowing the outcome, not being attached to an outcome, other than listening and hearing and learning. In the university community, I am finding that more challenging. And what you just said about, departments speaking to one another and playing together. And I've just recently taken on the role of managing community partnerships, which is, that's a big thing just within Center for Public Service, I should be clear. But figuring out, how do I bridge what Tulane needs from the community? How do I be an advocate, for what the community needs from Tulane? And as a native New Orleanian, I grew up feeling like, Tulane was its own thing and you couldn't penetrate it. And now I'm sitting in it and figuring that out. I really not sure I even answered your question. I just sort of gave you some reaction to all the things I'm hearing.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. You heard me start off saying I lived in the bus station in Oakland with 2 children.
Regrettably, I was late to this
Oh,
meeting,
okay,
so I did not hear that.
Well, when you said that, I immediately said, it's people like you that do the work that you do that play a big part in my life. So I have great, it's always like if somebody is working with unsheltered people, it's like you are my friend, probably. Yeah. And I am very grateful for the work that you do. And so I think when we start connecting the dots, we see that we have a lot more really in common with people than we think that we do.
That's true.
Those little kindnesses or whatever that sometimes people go the extra yard to do something and you don't know why they do it, but you don't know where they're coming from and what their circumstances are. You don't know who has a child with special abilities. You don't know who has just lost a baby. You don't know who has just lost a parent. The things that make us human are probably the things that pull us together. But that's why with Opportunities Collaborative, the first part is just getting to know people in an environment where you're just like talking to a person that you don't know, and you might tell them something about yourself that you wouldn't tell a person that you thought had power over you.
Yeah,
but it's a funny thing about when people are vulnerable and they're vulnerable, there's something about an accountability factor that we don't know a lot about. But when people tend to put their lives in your hands and it, and they know it, it creates a different kind of agreement and a different kind of partnership.
absolutely.
I haven't heard your voice, Suzanne, yet.
Hi, I'm Suzanne, and I apologize. I also had to join late, so I've only been here about 7 minutes. But thank you. I also work with CPS and the internship program and international programs, and I missed the first hour, so I'm just kind of trying to catch up. But yeah.
So what possessed you to join us?
Oh,
and that was really Southern, huh? What possessed you?
What possessed me? I was possessed by a desire for
Arkansas and the Mississippi.
Well, first of all, I knew it was something that Miriam was organizing, so it was going to be good. And then I read the little description and about you and what the topic was going to be, and it sounded interesting. And every time I attend something, it's you always hear some new things. But I agree with what you said about I don't know, just about like humanity and these little small actions and just not knowing where someone is coming from. But ultimately that's sort of like the base fabric of this type of work. It's like human to human and recognizing I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to contribute, but yeah.
Well, see, I put you on the spot, but I felt
that's all right.
handle it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it. I feel included.
Handle it. That's what happens when you have a nice smile.
Oh, thanks.
So now we're in the downside of we're on the part of, like, we're within maybe 20 minutes of closing our session. I had thought about doing some breakout groups, but if I'm going to let you make a choice. Would you like to be divided into maybe 3 breakout groups and discuss, let's do something asset-based. Like, what is the greatest, what gift do you bring? Something about you, a characteristic that makes you just the perfect person to be sitting here right now, having this discussion about moving this forward. Would you like to discuss that in a smaller group with each other? You don't have to come back and report it. So if that's a yes, put your hand up or say something, shake your head. Okay, it looks like that could be a yes. Okay, Samantha, you're in the car. It doesn't matter, huh? One thing I loved about Tulane is they knew I was old, so they gave me technical assistance with the computer stuff. So if it comes out of a woman, I know what to do with it. I'm a great baby catcher. If it plugs into the wall, I try not to touch it because I'll probably break it. So Miriam, could you do like 3 breakout groups for me, please? How did y'all do? So in terms of kind of ending this time that we have together, I would like to hear from each of you one thing that you are taking away from the time we spent together. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to put that together, and maybe it'll be the basis for some kind of action plan for moving forward, if you choose to do that. You'd always welcome any opportunity to say yay, who dat. So I'm gonna start with you, Lexus.
Connection and relationship should be the goal before anything else.
We can take up their offering and go home now. Emily.
Lots of things resonated, but I think approaching Tulane as a community as well, and applying what I do outside of these walls to within these walls in terms of my current role needs to happen.
Kendra.
I think taking more risks to connect, especially here at Tulane, it probably shouldn't be that difficult in terms of getting to a new different space or a new different group of people. We'll just see what happens.
Julia.
Yeah, I think similar to what folks have been saying, just that relationships is the work. Doesn't need to go beyond that.
Anne-Marie.
I would say the same. Connection is really at the heart of who we are and how we interact with one another. And it's so important to nurture that and care for that, and to bring that into everything that we do.
Deanna.
I think from the group I learned is important to have curiosity and trying to find the connection in human and non-human.
That's true. Okay, Carter.
I think the big thing I'll be thinking about is ways of conceptualizing connection that will resonate with academic researchers and get them to think more intentionally about how they connect with communities outside the university.
Suzanne.
I think my takeaway is keep showing up, even if you're late, because connection doesn't happen if you don't show up. That's the first step. So I'm going to keep showing up.
You always need a practical person on the team. Dala.
I think for me, I come away with this feeling a need to make space for the identities that we forge after we connect. So that we become different people through those connections, and that we need space for that to unfold, both time and maybe even physical space.
Thank you. Deidre.
I think understanding the value of the knowledge of the people you interact with and the people you engage, and recognizing that they're their own experts.
Samantha, you are rocking that hair. We talked about hair earlier. You are like, just, there you go.
Thank you. I will share that I'm late because I'm coming from the barber. So I just got here.
Good job.
And so I am late, so I did miss a good chunk of the dialogue, and I do apologize for that. But for the bit I was here, I think my takeaway and what I'm thinking about is, you know, my passion for wanting to continue to be a part of how do we make the importance of community connection and relationship a part of the culture of Tulane? Because I know we still have a lot of work to do in this Tulane community in that respect.
Loretta?
I continue to ask myself, you know, who's missing from the conversation, and finding ways to remove those barriers and invite more folks into the conversation.
Well, Miss Stephanie. And I expect that I will see grown people pictures, because I'm sure these babies are not
11, 9, and 7. That'll scare you, Kathryn. Sorry. I'm thinking about interestingly enough, I'm very much thinking about the circular nature. So I hear what everyone's saying about connection, and also the circular nation pattern, that the cyclicalness of connection and that importance, rather than a linear, like first this, then this. I'm just feeling a deep cycle reflect to how do I maintain the cycle of that too, especially since I'm saying that my babies are 11. Mama cat. Thank you for the time today. So nice to see all these faces.
It is. Miriam, what do you think? Did we do it?
It was fabulous. Yeah, thank you so much. You know, listening to all of you and having these wonderful people join us who work day in, day out to put out in the world some outstanding work. And you know, I think, you know, in terms of takeaways for me, putting oneself in that uncomfortable space where you're not familiar, and putting yourself in the learner's seat. And I think that's a big challenge within academia, being humble to put in perspective academic and scholarly knowledge, and engage in deep listening, and dismantle hierarchies. So yeah, I'm thankful for all the teachings and experiences and expertise that you shared with us, Ms. Kathryn, and everybody who attended.
Well, thank you. And I would like to close by saying, in the beginning, the middle, and the end, it's really nice to be back in this space. It was an incubator for me. And now my primary organization that I work with is FIRE. FIRE is the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. It's a UN affiliated organization, and I am an official ambassador. And what I like about FIRE is that FIRE is a new organization that is identifying new ambassadors for the UN that represent the communities that they live in versus the status thing that being an ambassador at the UN now. I mean, you just can't imagine how crazy it is and how classes it is and how much money is spent on stuff that never filters down to the bottom. And so the idea of actually cultivating leadership from the village level up is very much the same thing, the same circles like what we're having today, is people getting together and saying, how do we work collaboratively with other people trying to reach the same goal? And there are so many things that could separate us, but we know that if we don't do these things, we shall all surely perish together. And so there's no way of getting out of it. And so the work that you're doing here is a part of the work that's being done all over the planet right now of helping people get together and understand that we have issues that we have to solve, and we have to solve them together. So thank you for letting me be a part of it and to see it and be inspired that all is well. And hopefully I'll see you again. Take care now. Bye-bye.